Thank you and welcome back to the channel where we're continuing with First Kings. We're going to begin chapter 6 in just a moment, but before, Father, as I read and receive your word, may it deeply be rooted in me, so when difficulty comes, it will be your word that encourages and strengthens me. Amen. Solomon builds the temple, chapter 6. It was in mid-spring, during the fourth year of Solomon's reign, that he began the construction of the temple of the Lord. This was 480 years after the people of Israel were delivered from their slavery in the land of Egypt. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The foyer at the front of the temple was 30 feet wide, running across the entire width of the temple. It projected outward 15 feet from the front of the temple. Solomon also made narrow recessed windows throughout the temple. A complex of rooms was built against the outer walls of the temple, all the way around the sides and rear of the building. The complex was 3 stories high, the bottom floor being 7.5 feet wide, the second floor 9 feet wide, and the top floor 10.5 feet wide. The rooms were connected to the walls of the temple by beams resting on ledges built out from the wall, so the beams were not inserted into the walls themselves. The stones used in the construction of the temple were pre-finished at the quarry, so the entire structure was built without the sound of hammer, axe, or any other iron tool at the building site. The entrance to the bottom floor was on the south side of the temple. There were winding stairs going up to the second floor and another flight of stairs between the second and third floors. After completing the temple structure, Solomon put in a ceiling made of beams and planks of cedar. As already stated, there was a complex of rooms on 3 sides of the building, attached to the temple walls by cedar timbers. Each story of the complex was 7.5 feet high. Then the Lord gave this message to Solomon: "Concerning this temple you are building, if you keep all my laws and regulations and obey all my commands, I will fulfill through you the promise I made to your father David. I will live among the people of Israel and never forsake my people." The temple's interior. So Solomon finished building the temple. The entire inside, from floor to ceiling, was paneled with wood. He paneled the walls and ceilings with cedar, and he used cypress for the floors. He partitioned off an inner sanctuary, the most holy place, at the far end of the temple. It was 30 feet deep and was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. The main room in the temple, outside of the most holy place, was 60 feet long. Cedar paneling completely covered the stone walls throughout the temple, and the paneling was decorated with carvings of gourds and open flowers. Solomon prepared the inner sanctuary in the rear of the temple, where the Ark of the Lord's Covenant would be placed. This inner sanctuary was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. Solomon overlaid its walls and ceilings with pure gold. He also overlaid the altar made of cedar. Then he overlaid the rest of the temple's interior with pure gold, and he made gold chains to protect the entrance to the most holy place. So he finished overlaying the entire temple with gold, including the altar that belonged to the most holy place. Within the inner sanctuary, Solomon placed 2 cherubims made of olive wood, each 15 feet tall. The wingspan of each of the cherubim was 15 feet, each wing being 7.5 feet long. The 2 cherubim were identical in shape and size. Each was 15 feet tall. Solomon placed them side by side in the inner sanctuary of the temple. Their outspread wings reached from wall to wall, while their inner wings touched the center of the room. He overlaid the 2 cherubims with gold. All the walls of the inner sanctuary in the main room were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. The floor in both rooms was overlaid with gold. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, Solomon made double doors of olive wood with 5-sided doorposts. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and the doors were overlaid with gold. Then he made 4 side-sided doorposts of olive wood for the entrance to the temple. There were 2 folding doors of cypress wood, and each door was hinged to fold back upon itself. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim. palm trees and open flowers, and the doors were overlaid with gold. The walls of the inner courtyard were built so that there was one layer of cedar beams after every 3 layers of hewn stone. The foundation of the Lord's temple was laid in spring of the 4th year of Solomon's reign. The entire building was completed in every detail by mid-autumn of the 11th year of his reign. So it took 7 years to build the temple. Chapter 7. Solomon builds his palace. Solomon also built a palace for himself, and it took him 13 years to complete the construction. One of Solomon's buildings was called the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon. Lebanon, I guess, over there. It was 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The great cedar ceiling beams rested on 4 rows of cedar pillars. It had a cedar roof supported by 45 rafters that rested on 3 rows of pillars, 15 in each row. On each of the side walls there were 3 rows of windows facing each other. All the doorways were rectangular in frame. They were in sets of 3 facing each other. He also built the Hall of Pillars, which was 75 feet long and 45 feet wide. There was a porch at its front, covered by a canopy that was supported by pillars. There also was the Hall of the Throne, also known as the Hall of Judgment, where Solomon sat to hear legal matters. It was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. Solomon's living quarters surrounded a courtyard behind this hall. They were built the same way. He also built similar living quarters for Pharaoh's daughters, one of his wives. All these buildings were built entirely from huge, costly blocks of stone, cut and trimmed to exact measure on all sides. Some of the huge foundation stones were 15 feet long, and some were 12 feet long. The costly blocks of stone used in the walls were also cut to measure, and the cedar beams were also used. The walls of the great courtyard were built so that there was 1 layer of cedar beams for every 3 layers of hewn stone, just like the walls of the inner courtyard of the Lord's temple with its entrance foyer. Furnishings for the temple. King Solomon then asked for a man named Hiram to come from Tyre, for he was a craftsman skilled in bronze work. He was half Israelite, since his mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father had been a foundry worker from Tyre. So he came to work for King Solomon. Hiram cast 2 bronze pillars, each 25 feet tall and 18 feet in circumference. For the tops of the pillars he made capitals of molded bronze, each 7.5 feet tall. Each capital was decorated with 7 sets of latticework with interwoven chains. He also made 2 rows of pomegranates that encircled the latticework to decorate the capitals over the pillars. The capitals on the columns inside the foyer were shaped like lilies, and they were 6 feet tall. Each capital on the 2 pillars had 200 pomegranates in 2 rows around them, besides the rounded surface next to the latticework. Hiram set the pillars at the entrance of the temple, one toward the south and one toward the north. He named the one on the south Jachin, and the one on the north Boaz. The capitals on the pillars were shaped like lilies, and so the work of the pillar was finished. Then Hiram cast a large round tank, 15 feet across from rim to rim. It was called the Sea. It was 7.5 feet deep and about 45 feet in circumference. The sea was encircled just below its rim by 2 rows of decorative gourds. There were about 6 gourds per foot all the way around, and they had been cast as part of the tank. The sea rested on a base of 12 bronze oxen, all facing outward. 3 faced north, 3 faced west, 3 faced south, and 3 faced east. The walls of the sea were about 3 inches thick, and its rim flared out like a cup and resembled a lily blossom. It could hold about 11,000 gallons of water. Hiram also made 10 bronze water carts, each 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 4.5 feet tall. They were constructed with side panels braced with crossbars. Both the panels and the crossbars were decorated with carved lions, oxen, and cherubim. Above and below the lions and oxen were wreath decorations. Each of these carts had 4 bronze wheels and bronze axles. At each corner of the carts were supporting posts for the bronze basins. These supports were decorated with carvings of wreaths on each side. The top of each cart had a circular frame for the basin. It projected 1.5 feet above the cart's top like a round pedestal, and its opening was 2 1/4 feet across. It was decorated on the outside with carvings of wreaths. The panels of the carts were square, not round. Under the panels were 4 wheels that were connected to axles that had been cast as one unit with the cart. The wheels were 2 1/4 feet in diameter and were similar to chariot wheels. The axles, spokes, rims, and hubs were all cast from molten bronze. They were supports at each of the 4 corners of the carts, and these too were cast as one unit with the cart. Around the top of each cart there was a rim 9 inches wide. The supports and side panels were cast as one unit with the cart. Carvings of cherubim, lions, and palm trees decorated the panels and supports wherever there was room, and there were wreaths all around. All 10 water carts were the same size and were made alike, for each was cast from the same mold. Hiram also made 10 bronze basins, one for each cart. Each basin was 6 feet across and could hold 220 gallons of water. He arranged 5 carts on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north side. The sea was placed at the southeast corner of the temple. He also made the necessary pots, shovels, and basins. So at last, Hiram completed everything King Solomon had assigned to him to make for the temple of the Lord. 2 pillars, 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, 2 networks of chains that decorated the capitals, 400 pomegranates that hung from the chains on the capitals, 2 rows of pomegranates for each of the chain networks that were hung around the capitals on top of the pillars, the 10 water carts holding the 10 basins, the sea and the 12 oxen under it, the pots, the shovels, and the basins. All these utensils for the temple of the Lord that Hiram made for Solomon were made of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon did not weigh all the utensils because there were so many. The weight of the bronze could not be measured. So Solomon made all the furnishings of the temple of the Lord: the gold altar, the gold table for the bread and of the presence, the gold lampstands, 5 on the south and 5 on the north, in front of the most holy place, the flower decorations, lamps, and tongs, all of gold, the cups, lamp snuffers, basins, dishes, and fire pans, all of pure gold, the doors for the entrance of the most holy place and the main room of the temple, with their fronts overlaid with gold. So King Solomon finished all his work on the temple of the Lord. Then Solomon brought all the gifts his father David had dedicated, the silver, the gold, and the other utensils, and he stored them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. Well, thank you for joining me today. I know it's a little longer than normal, but I appreciate you listening, and I look forward to tomorrow. Have a great day and a blessed day. Bye.